And the cool thing is, during those low points, I really realized that it's just not me. I don't have to prove a thing. Christ already showed my worth when he died on the cross for me.
I'm Rush Witt, and you're listening to Straight to the Heart, a podcast from New Growth Press. Each episode includes thought-provoking conversations with leading Christian writers and thinkers. We hear who they are, what they believe, how they approach their work in ministry, and the moments and people who have changed their lives. In Straight to the Heart, we go beyond the books to connect with the remarkable people behind them. In this bonus episode of Season 2, I talk with Joe Hox, the illustrator behind the incredible books you know as the Good News for Little Hearts series. Of course you know about these books, like Buster's Ears Trip Him Up, Zoe's Hiding Place, Tori Comes Out of Her Shell, and others. They're full of biblical wisdom for problems kids feel, the same problems adults feel too. Today, Joe tells me his personal story of hardship and perseverance, and the Lord's providence to reach his dream of using his gift of illustration. And I cannot overstate how wildly talented Joe actually is. You can see his work right now on his Instagram account @Joe Hox, while you hear our rich and encouraging conversation. If you, like us, feel the struggle to understand your worth to the Lord, and you feel a strong desire to be used by him but aren't sure how it will all work out, this one's for you. This is Straight to the Heart. Let me tell you, I really enjoy talking to people who are creative, and it's not hard for me to see when someone's creative, especially when it's someone like you, because that's just who you are, and
Yeah.
it really is such an intriguing thing, because of the Good News for Little Heart series. And I follow you on Instagram and see your illustrations on there, which are amazing. But just tell me a little bit about your life and family, where you are, and what life is like for you.
The basics. My wife and I met at Dordt College, a Christian college in Sioux Center, Iowa. And we are raising 4 beautiful kids together here in a small Iowa town called Pella. Pella is known for its Dutch heritage, and we happen to be both of Dutch ancestry. And so we don our wooden shoes and Dutch costumes every spring. God's been good to us. He took a girl from the suburbs of Chicago and a boy from the sticks, and was able to make something work where where we balance each other out a lot. So yeah.
Opposites, they always say opposites attract. I guess there's some truth
Yeah.
there.
Prime
in your
example
story.
of that. She was on math team in high school, and I was as far from on math team as one could possibly be.
What was your experience growing up in terms of becoming or growing into your artistic gifting and illustrating when you were a kid and then forward, into adulthood?
So I grew up on a farm, and this was in the midst of the farm crisis of the 80s and 90s. Many farms were going bankrupt all over. And so it was actually a fairly high stress environment, certainly for my parents. And my parents protected, I have a brother and sister and myself. They protected us from a lot of the stress that was going on. But there was this constant danger that the farm was going to be snatched up. And in that environment, Dad responded to that by trying to outwork the pressure. And so he was a very, very hard worker. And I don't know how he was able to sustain that level of hard work, 16-hour days for years. He ended up getting a job in the factory, but he was also still continuing to farm full time. And so you plunk a kid who is just innately creative and a dreamer into that situation, and it was hard. I had um, another family member who I won't name, but someone who had come out every so often, and they they saw how hard my dad was working, and the rest of the family. And I was just a little kid at this time, but this family member saw how little I was contributing to the farm, um, and how little urgency I seemed to be living with. And he had a nickname for me, and that nickname was Worthless. And in
Oh,
fact,
oh,
to this day, I don't think I've heard that person call me by name. It
really?
was always Worthless, and
Oh,
he said it in a joking way, but man, oh man, that hit me hard. And I really kind of felt that way. I felt like I wasn't contributing to the farm. I would do my chores, and I would help out, like a clumsy little kid would help out. But I would also make a lot of mistakes. Like when I was a little bit older, I would do things like drive the tractor into the side of the barn. Um, I put the skid steer into the ditch. Um, my hay rows were always crooked. So I was about as, honestly, in terms of monetary value, as worthless a farm kid as you could have. I did I didn't I wasn't a good return on investment. Um, I really struggled early on with identity and worth. I had this ultra hardworking dad. Fortunately, my parents made it very clear that they loved me and cared for me, even with my peculiarities. Um, and I had a place there, but that title of worthless really haunted me. And I went into school even as early as like first or second grade. I was already thinking, "Am I worthless?" Uh, and so it put me on the search for something that would prove to myself, to my family, to the world that I have some sort of worth. I became pretty fixated on that, and um, fortunately, there are great opportunities in school to kind of test different things out. And one of those things that came along took the form of a Native American village diorama. I was assigned the Sioux tribe, and so I looked around and I noticed my classmates were all making um, little villages that were populated with like pipe cleaner people, or kind of stick figures cut out of construction paper. And then I looked at my own village, and it had um, uh, really dramatic imagery with natives working in the village, and they had windswept raven black hair and intricate beadwork and uh, and moccasins. And I noticed that maybe, I don't think at this point talent was what differentiated me, but it was certainly just love of visuals and attention to detail, um, and that was the spark. That silly little Native American diorama that my partner ended up taking home, so I don't have it. But that was what lit a fire, um, and kind of showed me, oh man, maybe you do have something of value here that you can offer the world. And really, through many of my grade school years, even though I was raised in the church and went to Christian school, my identity was wrapped up in kind of this idea of proving to the world that I am a great artist, which became kind of an idol, honestly. But God can use even our um, misplaced priorities, I think, to lead us into His path. And so, uh, so I had this plan. I was going to go to college and learn all the tricks I needed to become a great artist, and then life would be simple. I would be victorious. The New York Times would call me up and interview me for these great things that I did, and that's not remotely how it turned out. Uh, and I think it was all part of God's plan.
I really appreciate the grasp that you have on your story, because as you tell your own story, you tell it with a lot of insight into the things that were going on in your heart. And that really helps to clarify sort of how God developed you over those years. And it really does make for a great story. So after you hatch this college plan, you're going to get out into the world and start using your gifts. Then what happened? The New York Times didn't call. And so what did you do?
So we graduated from college. We got married right after college, and I really, oh my goodness, Rush, I was so naive. I really thought that I expected it to be easy. Um, but I didn't have a great portfolio yet. It had a lot of different art projects that I'd made in art college, and I didn't have anything that I could show agents or publishers yet. It wasn't tightened up, and so I thought I would buy myself some time and start a mural painting business. Um, and actually, surprisingly, that was working out pretty well. My wife was a substitute teacher. We moved back. We lived back on the farm. Actually, there was a little house that my grandma had once lived in. We lived back on the farm, and I started painting murals in homes and businesses. And word got out, and it was actually a pretty decent work. And it was fulfilling artistically, while also affording me time in the evenings to develop my portfolio. And
What year was this?
this was 2005.
Okay.
But I couldn't put in as long hours as I once could. My hands would kind of cramp up, and it became harder and harder to climb ladders. I was getting very slowly and gradually sicker, and I didn't know what was going on. And it came on so gradually that I didn't realize how bad it was getting, to the point that my body would just it came to the point where my body was just desperate for sleep. And I would go to bed at 10 o'clock, sleep a full night, and then my body would want to sleep till 11 in the morning. And that's no way to run a business. And I just didn't know, like, what is going on with me? Am I lazy? Is this like an ADD thing? I had no idea what was going on. Just that something was off, and I was getting more and more forgetful. For example, I would leave. I left my car in drive one time instead of park, and
Really?
I got out of the car, and the car
rolled
kept
away.
on driving up into our porch. And I spent a lot of time looking for stuff, misplacing things. I was getting pretty sick, and over the course of a few months, I realized, okay, this is something that it's not like just a mono or a cold or something. Something is really up. And so we started going to different doctors, and that was a whole story. I won't go into that, but eventually we did find a doctor who ran some tests and found that I had Lyme disease. And likely it was Lyme disease that I had acquired as a kid and just kind of stayed dormant in my system and then came out in adulthood. So I never had the bullseye rash or anything, but the blood work did eventually prove that I had Lyme disease. and it was, for whatever reason, very, very, very hard to treat. We had to do a lot of different um, trials of different drugs, heavy antibiotics, uh, but these symptoms weren't going away, and we decided that that there was no way, as long as I felt this way, old and achy and tired all the time, and somewhat confused, there was no way that I could sustain um, mural painting, let alone an illustration career, which is what my heart had been set on for so long. And so I went back to school. Fortunately, my college was incredibly gracious in allowing me to kind of tailor make an education degree and do it via correspondence. In fact, a professor came out of retirement to be my advisor and kind of help me cobble this degree together. And so I ended up with an art education degree because I loved art, and I can talk about art all day long, even if my body is failing. And so we set that course, and it was good to know that we still had this plan B, but it was also utterly um, it felt like a real defeat. It felt like I was taking my dream, my hope for how I was going to prove to the world that I had worth, and I was just going to light it on fire. And oh man, Katie and I both mourned that, because we both knew how much this goal of being an artist meant to me. And the crazy thing is, God still, even in spite of that attitude going into teaching, um, God still used that, and just it just shows how great He is, that He can take someone with such such a bad attitude.
Are you looking for engaging and insightful children's books that tackle the ups and downs of their little lives with a biblical perspective? Then you should know about the Good News for Little Hearts series, a collection of honest and engaging stories which help children ages 4 through 7 navigate various emotions and challenges through the lens of Scripture. Troubles like anxiety, anger, failure, loneliness, ruling desires, feeling shy, wanting to hide, and more. Each book is edited by biblical counselors connected to the Christian Counseling and Educational Foundation and illustrated by Joe Hox. This means each book addresses these topics with clear and compassionate care for the souls of children. You can learn more about the Good News for Little Hearts series by visiting newgrowthpress.com. What were the big moments of success that came along eventually where you could see making progress again, or where your dream of illustration has come together?
So really, about 8 or 9 years into teaching, I started to finally turn the corner. We found a doctor in Kansas City who really helped. He was tenacious in trying out lots of different things and finding just the right cocktail of interventions and drugs that helped me, supplements that helped me make improvements. And so I started drawing again, and it was almost like that moment when uh, it mentions in the Bible Samson's hair started growing back. He was all defeated, but then there's that little glimmer of hope, and for me that was sketching. And every day I would sketch a little bit, even if I had a busy grading schedule. I'd try to sketch in the evenings, and um, I started posting those to Instagram. Um, built a little bit of a following there, and was getting encouragement there. And then um, let's see, a local author said, "Hey, do you want to try illustrating this book for me?" And it was wonderful because it gave me the experience to learn the whole process. It was a small project, and so a lot of the stuff that usually gets pushed off to other people fell on my shoulders. Like these days, I illustrate a book, and I'm just making the pictures, and somebody else does all the design and the text and the sometimes even the cover. But in this case, my wife and I kind of wore all of the hats for this project, and so it was a great introduction to. And so the book was a Christmas mystery, and it's about little stuffed moose that come alive in a flower shop here in Pella. And it was a really safe way to get my feet wet in this, and of course the author was so sweet to take a chance on somebody with no experience who also was a little bit sick. And yeah, so that kind of gave me the confidence to put myself out there more. My wife is a writer, and so she was doing. She wrote some kids' books, some pieces of manuscripts that maybe we could submit together to publishers to try to um, get my name out and also hers. And so we submitted together to a few publishers and got a lot of no's and maybes and some interest. But finally, it was New Growth Press that came back and said, "Hey, we like the manuscript that Kate wrote, but maybe let's table that for now. But does this artist do any animal characters?" And of course, my Instagram was jam packed with animal characters that I'd been doing for a couple years, and so that was kind of the real opening to something that was more of a legit gig. And so my first book to a wider audience was through New Growth Press. It was Zoe's Hiding Place, and oh, it was just truly a dream come true. And I didn't care how many people would read it. I was just so excited to finally uh, have this opportunity to do something. And even better, it was this uh, confluence of my faith and my artistry. So I had many reasons to think this was a really special project. Yeah.
Wow, I don't know this story till
Mm.
now. I have not heard this story, and I really love it because I think a lot of people don't understand
Mm.
the just enormous challenge it is in terms of writing or illustrating and even just making the right connection
Yeah.
with someone. There are so many aspiring writers or illustrators out in the world, and they
Yes.
are doing what you're doing. They have certain outlets through social media, but to
Hmm.
find the right connection is, and I'm putting myself in your, story and thinking about,
Hmm.
what that's, some of those little moments for me, my little
Hmm.
moments have been like, and just the thrill of finally having some kind of break
Hmm.
is just enormous. What was it like in your house when you finally realized that this is a big traction point? This is the traction point that I've been looking for. What was it like
But
for the two of you?
yeah, it was absolutely the two of us. My wife has been an amazing partner through all this. Always so supportive, and we were utterly thrilled. We were thrilled, um, and so in order to maybe the listeners don't know the whole process, but oftentimes in order to get an illustration job, they'll ask for a sample. if you're not a known entity. And I certainly wasn't at that point. And so they asked for a sample, and I worked my tail off on it, and I submitted it and waited, and they came back with, oh, it's indoors. Can you try outdoors? And so I submitted another sample. It's outdoors, but it feels a little dull or not saturated enough. And so I made another and ended up making 4 samples before I finally got the job. And so every single time it just kind of built up. It was, like that hill that you go up before that first roller coaster drop. So when they finally said, okay, we can work with this. Oh, it was just incredible. Yeah, elation. Yeah.
So good. Good for you.
Yeah,
Good for
thank
you. I'm really happy to hear your story.
Thank you.
It makes me think of a question. So as you were growing up with this feeling
Yeah.
or this question of worth and worthlessness, and now fast forward and you're really enjoying a lot of success and fruit to your
Mhm.
waiting and working, are there still challenges that you feel maybe on a regular basis of feeling the need to prove yourself still?
Mm,
Or are there certain obstacles in your heart or mind that might hold you back? Do you have things like that still kind of going on, or do you feel like you've kind of broken through?
that's a good question. I would say my experience as a teacher and I think between Lyme disease and teaching, that whole passage of time was kind of a crucible that I had to go through in order to completely change my perspective. So whereas before I really wanted to prove something, I really thought that um, didn't have any worth unless I could show the world something amazing. A lot of insecurity and kind of messed up pride, self focus in that. Um, so through those 12 years, I spent. So there was a passage of time where I was so sick that any moment that I wasn't teaching, I was wrapped up in a blanket. That I would wrap myself up real tight, like a mummy, and I would lay on the floor because that hard pressure of the floor would help ease my aches. And I would be my kids would play cars on their kind of dead looking dad, and it was just so pathetic. But through that time, I realized there is the um, I there's no way that I can find my worth in artistry because it's very likely that this dream won't be realized. In fact, there was a time where, and you've done counseling, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a time when the only passage of the Bible that really gave me comfort was Psalm 88, which is the most depressing, hopeless psalm. But that psalm, I clung to that because that told me other people have been through this level of hopelessness, feeling zero hope, zero. But God has had people there and he still used them. Um, and so that really kind of burned off that sense that I needed to prove something. And so it made me search for, okay, if if my contribution is very, very tiny, can God still use it? So as a dad, I can't be a soccer coach, but I sure can sit there and look at a book with a kid and have my arm wrapped around them. And they'll have more memories associated with books because we sit there and read a book together. As a teacher, I might not be able to walk around the classroom certain days, but I can still have positive interactions with kids. I can still encourage the ones who are gifted and help grow ones that need growth in one way or another. I can still use my words, and so it was a real shift for me. And the cool thing is, during those low points, I really realized that it's just not me. I don't have to prove a thing. Christ already showed my worth when he died on the cross for me. And it's written right there that, he sees us even when we're, just a tiny, tiny little thing inside our mama's tummies. And so, yeah, that experience I think was necessary, so hard, but so necessary for me to grow in my faith and get a sense of perspective. I still have moments where the feelings of worthlessness haunt me. But that passage of time really burned off a lot of that.
How do you help a child get to know someone they can't see and hear? In Who is Jesus, author Kate Hox and illustrator Joe Hox, my guest today, bring 40 word pictures of Jesus to life so children can get to know Jesus better. The Bible is filled with stories and symbols that point us to Jesus as the Savior, the only one who can bring us back to God. In Who is Jesus, Joe and Kate Hox combine illustrations and deep thoughts simply shared to guide family devotions and encourage rich conversations about who Jesus is, why he came to earth, and how we can get to know him now. In this book, families will explore together the rich imagery of the Bible and learn about God's great love for his people through Jesus Christ, his son. Is your family looking for a book to enjoy together? Consider Who is Jesus 40 Pictures to Share with your family. You can learn more about this book and many more by visiting newgrowthpress.com. Such a powerful perspective and immensely helpful to us. And your experience is, I'm sure, uniquely helpful to others who are struggling to find their way into and through their own sense of gifting. And when it comes to your maybe investment or advice to other illustrators, what advice do you give to them, or what advice would you give to yourself if you went back in a time machine to those early days of just kind of uncertainty and trying to find your way in your illustrative gift?
What advice would I give? In the New Testament, when there are instructions for elders, they need to get their house in order first before they can minister to a wider audience. I think that applies here. As much as we, had these dreams of doing these big things, that's all really good. But if we've alienated the people that we would celebrate milestones with, then it's of no use. And so I would tell any young illustrator, get your house in order first. Make sure that you are loving people well. Don't make it all about you. Learn how to manage your time and your gift well.
That's good.
I would say that.
Yeah, that's good. I'm really a process thinker, I've been told. So I like to
Mm-hmm.
think about the process of things, and I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
other people do as well. And it's something that not many people have a chance to look into in terms of the process of an illustrator like you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wonder if you could briefly describe what your process is like. What's a day like for you, or how do you go about fulfilling a project or plan? What's your creative process?
Creative process. I see sketching as a lifestyle, so um, that's kind of how I process the world. I'm wherever I go, I'm sketching. In church, when we have intermission during our kids' plays, I'm sketching. Uh, so my sketchbooks are just big catalogs of observations, and it's always been that way ever since that diorama. Um, so when initially a publisher or a self-published author will furnish me with a manuscript, and I'll read through the manuscript and just dream. And that's my favorite part, is just kind of uh, imagine. It feels like a superpower to be able to create something just from your mind's eye. It is so empowering. To craft a world, and that's my favorite part of it. So I'll start with a whole bunch of sketches and identify those moments that are especially evocative in the manuscript, and I'll sketch a lot of those out, um, and make kind of a eventually work toward making a dummy that I'll send to the client for feedback. Is this the right direction? Are these visuals the right visuals to tell the story the best way? And then it's a lot of back and forth through the process. After they send me their feedback, I make more finished looking illustrations, and back and forth. And that's been one of the most delightful parts of it, is um, having that synergy of other people's creative input on the project. It always ends up better when it's a collaboration. And so um, yeah, that's been one of the kind of the hidden things that I didn't anticipate, was just how much joy I would find in collaboration.
Yeah, when you have a dream of, you're dreaming up a world or an illustration for a book, in the end, how much, maybe a percentage, how much is the final result the same as your initial dream? Is it a big change to the end, or do you tend to really stick to that picture, and you find what's in your mind becomes really close to verbatim out in the finished work?
Um, that's a really good question. I would say 90% is the same,
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
but I don't. It's weird. I don't see the picture perfectly in my head, but I just have this feeling that this sounds so hokey, but it's just the truth. It feels like love, like infatuation, like um. So as I'm working on an illustration, I kind of follow that feeling of this feels right. I'm in love with this story. And
Yeah,
that sounds kind of
that
dumb,
makes
but
sense. It doesn't sound dumb at all. It makes a lot of sense. I've had some moments, I'm not an illustrator, but I've had some moments where you just know, I don't know, other people might say it's a gut
yeah,
sense, or you just have this instinct of, oh, I'm onto something. Oh,
yeah,
this is going to work.
yeah,
And then it fuels fuels your creative juices. So I
Yeah.
understand what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for describing that. I'm really intrigued by how that works.
Yeah.
And I'm really intrigued by how you think about illustrating and what that process is like. So
There's a potter down in Memphis named Eddie Ifa who I listened to him speak at an event for Christian creatives one time, and he talked about how whenever he throws a pot on the wheel, he's thinking about the people that will use that, and he's praying for them, and um, just kind of thinking that he is serving them up something beautiful. And man, I love that posture of the artist isn't some um, brilliant genius. The artist is a servant caring for people with his own gifts. What a what a healthy posture.
yeah, so a good question here. It's unique that as an illustrator, you have such a wonderful opportunity to work with your wife and really collaborate. And I wonder what that collaboration is like in let me say it a different way. I'll just say it the simple way. So I wonder what's that collaboration like between you?
So my wife is Kate Hox, and she was a teacher. She didn't really ever set out to be an author. Uh, it was kind of funny. She was the one who first put the idea of my being a teacher into my head, and over time, I kind of put the idea of being an author into her head. Um, so uh, we've always just clicked. She she is very different from me. She thinks in an organized manner. Uh, she
Does she like math?
she loves math. She she sees the value of things like boundaries, which often feel kind of alien to me. Um, she is incredibly wise and discerning, um, and she's often 2 or 3 steps ahead of me in the thinking process. Uh, I, on the other hand, introduce some degree of chaos and spontaneity into her life, and and so we really help each other along um, in some ways. So when I first I wanted so badly to get into illustration, and she just saw a solution. Well, I'll just write you a book to illustrate. Simple as that. And so so she did. She spent some time during nap time when the kids were really small, writing a book about giants that we haven't yet brought to a publisher, but and I illustrated it, and then she got really excited about um, a Bible book um, that she could potentially write, and so she wrote a few entries for that, a rhyming chronological book about the Bible, and that's what we submitted to a few publishers originally when I was first getting my start. Um, but yeah, she never really started with the idea of being an established author. She started with the idea of helping her husband get his feet under him in his career, and that is so who she is. And oh man, I admire that woman so much. She's always been um, uh, someone who kind of helps lift up. So, so the yeah, we in terms of process day to day, she's kind of my in-house art director. Uh, she's really good at articulating herself. So she can communicate to me really well what is missing in an illustration, what kids will connect to, what moms will connect to, and so I listen to her. I've learned to listen to her. Sometimes my ideas are too far out there that people might not connect to them, and so she's able to kind of gently rein me in a little bit, and then so right now she's working on another devotional. Our first devotional that we worked on together was "Who is Jesus?" 40 pictures to share with your family, and it's a devotional for families, biblical theology. So all of these stories from Scripture that point us to Christ, and and so that process, she'll write, research, and then she'll read her samples to me, and it's just been such a lovely collaboration to be able to go deeper into the Word together, um, to ask questions of each other, to discover the absolute artistry of the Bible and how it's knit together. And it's like an archaeological site. You uncover some treasure, and then you move that treasure off to the side, and underneath is another treasure. People don't realize how amazing the Word of God is, how interconnected um, and the way different themes echo over and over and over again, and then culminate in Christ. It really does bolster the faith to see how incredibly intricately crafted the Word of God is, and so we've been able to discover that together in this journey, and it's brought us closer together. It's boosted our individual faith, but also our faith as a family. So we're able to share these discoveries with our kids that we find in the Word, and collaboration in a marriage toward the Lord is such a good thing.
I love it. And you and Katie are such a great match in that way.
Thank you.
And I have so enjoyed our conversation. I am fascinated by people like you in the world who have the gifts you have. And there just are not very many, in my view. There are not very many. And so it makes it all the more encouraging and interesting to be able to just hear about what you do. So thanks for spending that time with me.
Yeah, it's been a joy.
And just like that, this bonus episode closes out Season 2 of Straight to the Heart. Can you believe it? But Season 3 is coming soon, so it's a good time to look back at the first 2 seasons and click play on any episodes you may have missed, or listen again to your favorites. And please continue to like, share, subscribe, and rate the podcast to help us reach more listeners. We appreciate you, our faithful subscribers, and look forward to seeing you in Season 3. This is Straight to the Heart.